All characters and events described in this story are fictitious. Any similarities with real people or situations are purely coincidental. Please do not judge harshly. Every author was once a beginner and learned to listen between the lines. Write in the comments what city you are from and where you are listening to this story. Don't forget to share your life experience and definitely subscribe to our channel so as not to miss the next exciting story. Well, let's begin. Alex Miller woke up to the sound of his alarm clock at exactly 6:30 a.m., as usual, outside the window of their neat two-story house in the suburbs of Chicago. In the town of Arlington Heights, the pre-dawn haze still hung. Spring in Illinois was just beginning, and the lawns along the street were barely covered with the first greenery. He stretched, feeling his joints creak. 35 years were still making themselves felt after 10 years of drawings and construction. Susan slept nearby, her nose buried in her pillow. Her blonde hair was scattered across the white pillowcase, and one strand trembled slightly with her breath. Alex smiled. Even after 5 years of marriage, he still found her damn beautiful in the morning when she was like this. No makeup, no fuss, just his Suze. The alarm clock on her side of the bed also beeped, but she just muttered something incomprehensible and pulled the blanket over her head. Alex chuckled, turned off both phones, and gently shook her shoulder. Hey, sleepyhead, get up. The world is waiting for your brilliant ideas. Susan opened one eye, looked at him with mock indignation, and muttered, The world will wait, and you could bring me some coffee since you woke me up. It's called blackmail, he said, but was already getting out of bed. Okay, I took yours, but only because you look cute when you're angry. She snorted, but the corners of her lips twitched into a smile. Alex walked into the kitchen, feeling the wooden floor pleasantly cool on his bare feet. Their house was small but cozy, white walls, oak floors, a couple of paintings of Lake Michigan that they bought at the crossroads 3 years ago. He turned on the coffee maker and took out two mugs, her favorite, with the inscription Boss Lady, and his own, worn, with the Chicago Cubs logo. While the coffee was bubbling, he looked out the window. The neighbor, old Jim, was already working on his lawn, although the grass was barely coming through. Alex shook his head, the American dream at its finest. Susan came down 10 minutes later, already in jeans and a light sweater. She worked at a marketing firm in downtown Chicago, and her mornings always started with a bit of chaos, getting ready, making calls, checking email. Alex, as an engineer at a construction company, could afford himself a little more relaxation. His office was 10 minutes away, and the workday began later. You forgot to take out the trash again, she said, pouring herself some coffee. I'm sorry, I'll correct myself. He raised his hands in a playful gesture of surrender. But in my defense, I was cooking dinner yesterday. Macaroni and cheese from a box is not dinner, Alex Miller. This is a crime against cooking. You ate and even asked for more, he retorted, sitting down opposite her at the small kitchen table. Susan rolled her eyes but laughed. This morning ritual of theirs teasing each other was part of why he loved her. They met 6 years ago at a mutual friend's party. Alex was then a slightly tipsy idiot who tried to impress her with his knowledge of architecture, and she was a witty blonde who tore his arguments to smithereens. A year later, he proposed to her on the shores of Lake Michigan, under the cold November wind, with a ring that he bought with his last savings. She said yes, and since then he has never regretted it. You're kind of thoughtful today, she remarked, taking a sip of coffee. Something at work? No, just thinking about us, he shrugged. 5 years, Suze. Tomorrow is the 1st of April, and I still haven't figured out how to prank you. Her eyes lit up. She loved their little traditions, stupid jokes on April Fool's Day, surprises on anniversaries. Last summer, he pretended to forget her birthday and then took her to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. She then almost killed him for this forgetfulness, but then admitted that it was the best gift. Just don't do anything to the spiders, she warned. I still haven't forgiven you for that plastic nightmare in the shower 2 years ago. I promise, no spiders. He raised his hand as if taking an oath. But I'll think of something. Something grandiose. Grandiose, you say? She narrowed her eyes. Well, try it. But if it's bad, I'll demand compensation. For example, massage. Agreed, he winked. They finished breakfast in the usual silence, with only the radio playing some classic rock quietly in the background. Susan left to get ready and Alex was washing the dishes when an idea started to form in his head. Joke. Not just a joke, but something that would truly surprise her. For a week now he had felt that their lives had become too predictable. Work, home, occasional trips to the city. Susan had hinted a couple of times that she lacked spontaneity, and he wanted to fix that. By the time she shouted, "I'm going," and slammed the door, a plan took shape in Alex's head. He'll take the day off tomorrow, tell her he's going on a business trip for the day, supposedly some urgent project in a neighboring state. She will grumble, but she will put up with it. Instead, he'll book a room at Lakewood Country Club, a posh place an hour outside of Chicago with a lake, a spa, and everything she loves. He will return home after work, say that the business trip is canceled, and take her there for the weekend. Perfect. She will be shocked, then delighted, and he will receive his rightful points as the best husband of the year. Alex took out his phone and opened the Lakewood website. The place looked like something out of a postcard, wooden cottages by the water, forest, fireplaces in the rooms. The prices were steep, but he could afford it. For the last 6 months, he had made good money on the shopping center project. He chose a Lakeview suite and added a spa package for two and a bottle of champagne to his booking. Confirmation came a minute later. "Mr. Miller, your room is booked for April 1st, 3. We are waiting for you at Lakewood." He smiled, imagining her reaction. Susan loved such places. She always said that she dreamed of escaping from the bustle of the city. This will not be just a joke, but a gift. Maybe even a chance to shake up their marriage, add that very spontaneity that she was missing. The day at work passed in a blur. Alex was sitting at the drawings of the new bridge, but his thoughts were far away in Lakewood, with Susan with a glass of wine by the fireplace. His colleague and best friend David Crawford, or simply Dev, as everyone called him, noticed this over lunch. "Have you fallen in love again?" Dev asked, taking a bite of his sandwich. They were sitting in a cafe across the street from the office, where they usually got food. "Maybe so," Alex chuckled. "Tomorrow is the 1st of April, and I have thought of something for Susan." "Oh, intrigue," Dev raised an eyebrow. "Tell me." Alex briefly outlined the plan. Business trip as cover, Lakewood, surprise. Dev listened, nodding, and then patted him on the shoulder. "Not bad, old man. She will definitely appreciate it. Just don't forget the champagne. These things don't work without it." "Already in armor," said Alex. "And a spa. She will be delighted. Make sure she doesn't decide that you really left and throw a party at home," Dev winked. "Susan, come on, she'd rather be bored and write sad texts to me," Alex laughed. He was confident in her. 5 years is not just that. They've been through a lot. Moving, fighting over money, her miscarriage 2 years ago. But every time they got out together, she was his person. The day ended late. We had to stay late to finish the drawings. He returned home around 7. Susan was already there, sitting on the couch with her laptop and a glass of wine. "Long today," she said, without looking up from the screen. "Yes, the bridge doesn't want to build itself." He threw his jacket on a chair and sat down next to him. "How are you?" "Fine. Tired. The client again demands that the entire campaign be redone overnight." "Leave them. Let's go somewhere," he said jokingly, but tomorrow's plan was already spinning in his head. "Ha, funny." She closed the laptop and looked at him. "Maybe on the weekend?" "We'll see," he smiled mysteriously. "By the way, I have a business trip tomorrow. For a day to Indiana. Urgent object." Her face fell. "Seriously, another weekend without you?" "One day, Suze. I'll be back tomorrow evening, and I'm all yours." She sighed but nodded. Cold. The morning of April 1st was special for Alex Miller. He opened his eyes, feeling a little trepidation, like a child before Christmas. Today was the day of his big joke, the day when he would surprise Susan in a way he had not surprised her in a long time. Outside their Arlington Heights home, the sky was gray, with occasional glimpses of the sun breaking through the clouds. Spring in Illinois was still in a hurry, and a light wind blew last year's leaves along the street. Alex stretched, trying not to wake Susan, who was still asleep, curled up under the covers. Her breathing was even almost inaudible, and for a second he admired her so calm, so at home. He quietly got up, went into the bathroom, and washed his face with cold water to drive away the remnants of sleep. The mirror reflected a 35-year-old man, slightly disheveled, dark hair, light stubble, shadows under his eyes from working on drawings late last night. Nothing special, but Susan always said she liked his eyes, the honest ones, as she called them. Alex smiled at his reflection. Today, those honest eyes would lie to her outright, and he could hardly contain his laughter, imagining her reaction. The plan was simple but ingenious. In the morning, he will tell her that he is leaving on a business trip, supposedly to Indianapolis, to a facility that urgently needs to be checked. He had already mentioned it yesterday to set the stage, and her sad sigh was the perfect confirmation that she believed it. At work, he will take a day off that is long overdue, finish things early, and return home by 6 in the evening. He will say that the business trip is canceled, saying that the client has changed his mind. And then, when she starts grumbling about another ruined weekend, he will take out a printout of the Lakewood reservation and announce, "Get ready, we're going on vacation." She will be shocked, then she will laugh, maybe even throw a pillow at him for such a prank. And then they'll get into his old Ford, and an hour later, they'll be at the country club with a lake, a spa, and champagne. Perfect. Alex went down to the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and took out a suitcase from the pantry. He decided to assemble it in advance so that everything would look believable. A few shirts, jeans, a pair of socks, nothing special, just so she can notice how he's getting ready. The suitcase was old, worn, with a sticker that said Lake Michigan, a memory of their first vacation together. He threw another sweater there, although he knew that he would take another, better one for Lakewood. The main thing is to create an illusion. Susan woke up half an hour later when the coffee had already filled the kitchen with its aroma. She came downstairs, yawning, in pajamas with small flowers, which he gave her last New Year. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she looked a little rumpled, but still so damn cute. "Good morning," she said in a hoarse voice, rubbing her eyes. "Why did you get up so early?" "Business trip, remember?" He tried to make his voice a little tired, as if the prospect of the trip did not excite him. "We need to get ready before work." She froze, looking at him, then turned her gaze to the suitcase standing by the door. "Seriously, today?" There was so much disappointment in her tone that Alex almost gave himself away with a smile. She was a good actress, but he knew her too well, that slight tilt of her head, those slightly narrowed eyes. She was really upset. "Yes, Suze," he shrugged, pouring her coffee into her boss lady mug. "Urgent call. Some idiot in Indianapolis miscalculated the foundation load. You'll have to go and look. But you said that you'd be back in the evening." She took the mug and sat down at the table, looking at him over the edge. "Is this really one day?" "Exactly," he nodded, trying not to overact. "Go there in the morning, back in the evening. I'll be home by 8 if there's no traffic." She sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Another weekend without you. I'm starting to think you're married to your job, not me." "Hey, don't exaggerate." He sat down opposite her, pushing a plate of toast towards her. "One day, and I'm all yours. Maybe we can go somewhere on Saturday, to the cinema or to that Italian restaurant you like." "Maybe," she shrugged, but there was still sadness in her voice. "It's just boring without you, you know." Alex felt a pang of guilt. She looked so sincere, so vulnerable at that moment that he wanted to tell everything right there. But he restrained himself. It was a joke, yes, but for a good cause. She deserved a surprise, she deserved a rest, and he was going to give it to her. "I know," he reached out and squeezed her palm. "I promise I'll be back quickly, and I'll call you when I arrive." "Okay," she smiled weakly, "but if you forget to call, I will kill you." "Agreed," he winked, feeling anticipation growing inside. She bought it. Fully. They ate breakfast in silence, with only the radio playing Sweet Home Chicago quietly in the background, the song they'd listened to in the car when they first started dating. Susan finished her toast, drank her coffee, and stood up. "I'll go get ready. I have a presentation today, so feel sorry for me if I'm angry by the evening." "I always feel sorry for you," he chuckled. "Good luck with the presentation." "Thank you." She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. "And good luck to you with your foundation. Don't get stuck there." "I'll try." He followed her with his gaze as she went upstairs. Everything went according to plan. Alex finished packing his suitcase, throwing in a toothbrush and razor for good measure. Then he took out a printout of the Lakewood armor from his desk drawer. He had specially printed it out yesterday in the office so that everything would look solemn when he presented it to Susan in the evening. I put the sheet in my jacket pocket so as not to forget. I checked my phone. The confirmation from the club was still in the mail. The spa was booked for tomorrow. Champagne was waiting in the room. He imagined her face when she saw the cottage overlooking the lake, and he could hardly contain his smile. When Susan came downstairs, already dressed for work in black trousers and a white blouse, with a bag over her shoulder, he stood at the door, suitcase in hand, ready for the final scene. "Well, it's time," he said, pretending to check the car keys. "Wish me luck." She came closer and looked up at him. Her blue eyes were a little sad, and she sighed again. "Good luck, Alex. Really call, okay? I will be bored without you." "I promise." He leaned down and kissed her slowly, feeling the warmth of her lips and the light scent of her perfume. "See you tonight, Suze." "See you this evening," she smiled, but the smile came out strained. Then she turned and walked out to her car, parked in the driveway. Alex watched as she got into her Honda Civic, waved to him through the window, and drove away. He closed the door, feeling a slight pang of conscience. She really looked sad, but it was worth it. By the evening, she will laugh about it, hug him, and tell him what an idiot he still is. He was sure of it. He got into his Ford, threw his suitcase in the back seat, and turned on the radio. Sweet Home Chicago was still playing, and he turned up the volume, humming to himself. The road to the office took 15 minutes. There were almost no traffic jams, only just a few rare cars and a school bus on the corner. Alex parked at his company's low-rise building, took out his phone and texted Dev. "Everything is ready." She believed. The answer came a minute later. "You're a genius. Don't screw it up." He laughed, turned off the phone, and went inside. The day promised to be easy. He had already agreed with his boss about the afternoon off. All that remained was to finish a couple of drawings and hand them over to a colleague. In his head, he was already in Lakewood with Susan by the fireplace. This will be the best April Fool's Day of their lives. The office was typical of a small engineering firm. Rows of desks with computers, drawings on the walls, the smell of coffee and paper. The windows overlooked the parking lot and a piece of road where cars passed from time to time. Alex threw his jacket over the back of his chair, turned on his computer, and opened the bridge project he'd been working on for the past 2 weeks. Today, he planned to finish the calculations and hand them over to a colleague so that he could take a day off after lunch. The boss, Old Man Harris, didn't mind Alex hadn't taken a day off for a long time, and the project was almost ready. He had been working for about an hour when David Crawford, or simply Dev, as everyone called him, appeared at the door. Tall, with short reddish hair and a perpetual grin, Dev had been his best friend since college. They studied together at the University of Illinois, got their first jobs together, and then, by pure chance, ended up working at the same company. Dev was a bachelor by conviction, loved beer, baseball, and making fun of Alex for his family idol. "Well, prank genius, how are you?" Dev plopped down on the chair opposite, holding a bottle of water in his hands. "Is Susan already crying at home with sadness?" "For now, he's just sad." Alex leaned back in his chair, pleased with himself. "I almost lost it this morning when she looked at me with her puppy dog eyes. But I keep my standards. Everything is according to plan." "Well done," Dev nodded with feigned seriousness. Otherwise, I thought you'd break down and run home with flowers and apologies. You can't wait, Alex grinned. She believed in the business trip. She said she would miss her. Even his voice trembled. An Oscar for this. Dev took a sip of water. Are you sure she won't guess? Susan is smart. What if she's already rummaging through your laptop looking for a reservation? It doesn't rummage. Alex shook his head. She left for work. She had a presentation there. And then I hid everything. The printout is in the jacket. She doesn't know the password for the email. I'm a genius, Dev. Admit it. Okay, genius. Dev raised his hands in a playful gesture of surrender. But if she finds out about you and causes a scandal, I will be the first to say, I warned you. They laughed and Alex returned to the drawings, but his thoughts were far away. He imagined how he would come home in the evening, throw his suitcase in the hallway and say, the business trip is canceled. And then he takes out the reservation, and Susan first looks at him with disbelief, and then rushes to hug him. Maybe she'll even cry with joy. She's always been emotional. This will be their best weekend in the last couple of years. By noon, he had completed his calculations and sent them to his colleague, Bob, with a short note. Check, I'm leaving after lunch. Bob, a balding man in his 40s, just nodded from behind his desk without looking up from the screen. Alex stood up, stretched, and looked at the clock 12:15. It's time for lunch. He grabbed his jacket and waved to Dev. Shall we go? The cafe is calling. Always ready, Dev stood up, and they went downstairs to a small place across the street where they usually got sandwiches and coffee. Joe and Sons, as the diner was called, was a typical American diner. Worn red sofas, the smell of frying bacon, and a waitress in her 50s who knew all the regulars by name. They sat by the window and ordered a turkey sandwich and fries. It was raining lightly outside the window, and the drops flowed down the glass, leaving blurry marks. Alex looked at them, feeling anticipation growing inside him. Okay, let's do it again, Dev said, taking a bite of his sandwich. You return home, pretend that the business trip was aborted, and then bam, Lakewood. She is shocked. You leave and everyone is happy. Did I understand correctly? To the point, Alex nodded, chewing a potato. I even packed my suitcase so she could see. Everything is thought out. What if she decides to check? Will he call you during the day and ask how things are in Indianapolis? I'll say that the site is noisy. I'll call you back later. Alex shrugged. She won't dig. She trusts me. Trusts you, you say? Dev narrowed his eyes. Well, look. Women are like that. Today they trust, and tomorrow you find her shoes in the neighbor's closet. Very funny, Alex rolled his eyes. Susan is not like that. We've been together for 5 years, Dev. She's not the type to run around neighbors. Okay, Dev raised his hands. Just kidding. But if anything, I'm first in line on your couch when she kicks you out. Dream, Alex laughed. You hang around with us too often anyway. Susan already thinks you're our third in marriage. Well, I wouldn't mind, Dev winked. She cooks better than my mother, and prettier. Keep your hands off my wife, idiot. Alex threw a napkin at him, and they laughed again. The conversation flowed smoothly into the usual chatter about work, about the baseball game over the weekend, about Bob spilling coffee on his drawings again. But at some point, Dev returned to the topic of Lakewood. Listen, what are you planning there? He asked, finishing his sandwich. Well, except for the spa and champagne. It's your weekend, you need to shake things up. Shake yourself up? Alex raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Well, you understand, Dev grinned. Shake up the old stuff. Fireplace, champagne, room for two. This is straight out of a scene from a romantic movie, only without censorship. Alex almost choked on his coffee. Are you serious? Are you and I going to discuss my personal life now? Why not? Dev shrugged. You're not just taking her to Lakewood. The spa is for her. What's for you? Admit it, old man. Do you want romance or something cooler? You're unbearable. Alex shook his head, but couldn't help but smile. Okay, yes, maybe romance. We haven't gone out together for a long time. All work, Home, routine. I want her to remember why she married me. Oh, how sweet, Dev pretended to wipe away a tear. But I still bet on the cooler. Fireplace, champagne, these are classics. The main thing is, don't forget to turn off your phone, otherwise she will start taking pictures of food for Instagram, and all the romance will go down the drain. She's not like that, Alex laughed. Although, yes, it's better to hide the phone. Let him focus on me. This is the attitude, Dev patted him on the shoulder. Listen, what if she really decides that you left and throws a party at home? You arrive, and there is a crowd of her girlfriends with wine and karaoke. It won't suit me, Alex shook his head. She said she would miss her, and I believe her. Well, you know better, Dev shrugged. But if anything happens, call me for karaoke. I can sing Sweet Home Chicago better than you. Dream, Alex finished his coffee and looked at his watch. Okay, it's time to go back. We need to hand in the drawings and go home. They returned to the office and Alex quickly finished his business. By 2 o'clock, he had already said goodbye to Bob, grabbed his jacket, and went down to the car. The rain stopped and the sun finally broke through the clouds, reflecting in the puddles on the asphalt. He got behind the wheel, turned on the radio, and Sweet Home Chicago started playing again, as if fate was winking at him. Alex smiled, humming to himself, and drove home earlier than planned. He decided to stop at the flower shop on the corner to buy Susan some tulips, her favorite. This will be the icing on the cake for his surprise. Alex Miller turned onto his street in Arlington Heights around 5 p.m., feeling a pleasant lightness in his chest. The day went better than he expected. Work was over, tulips for Susan lay on the passenger seat, wrapped in craft paper, and a printout of the Lakewood armor was waiting in his jacket pocket. The sun was already setting, painting suburban houses in warm orange tones. The spring air smelled of dampness and the first grass, and Alex lowered the window to breathe it in deeply. The radio was playing some old rock music, but he turned it off. He wanted silence before the big moment. He imagined walking home, throwing his suitcase in the hallway and saying, "The business trip is canceled." And then her surprised look, laughter, and the road to the country club. Everything was ready. He parked his Ford in the driveway next to Susan's car. Her Honda Civic was parked, which meant she was already home. Alex looked at his watch. 5:10. It's early, but not surprising. She was talking about a presentation, and such things either end quickly or drag on until the night. Apparently, she was lucky. He took out his phone, deciding to call her on the way to the door to add drama to his return. I dialed the number, took the tulips and suitcase, and walked towards the house, listening to the beeps. She answered after the third. Alex? Her voice sounded a little out of breath, as if she had just climbed the stairs. Where are you? Hi, Suze, he smiled, inserting the key into the lock. I'm driving back from Indianapolis. How are you? Oh, okay, she hesitated, and he heard a slight noise in the background, something like a muffled sound, as if the TV was on. How are you? Tired? A little. He pushed the door and entered the hallway, trying to speak quietly so as not to give himself away. It was a mess, but they sorted it out. I'll be home soon. Are you bored without me? Very, she chuckled, but there was something strange in her tone, some kind of tension. I'm thinking about what to do. Maybe I'll watch a movie. Great idea. He placed the suitcase against the wall, holding the tulips in one hand and the phone in the other. Choose something good. We'll look at it together when I get back. We agreed. She hesitated again. Are you sure you'll be there soon? In about 40 minutes, if there are no traffic jams. He could hardly contain his laughter. A couple more steps, and he would enter the living room, where she was probably sitting on the sofa with her laptop. Okay, see you later, Suze. See you later, she hung up. Alex put the phone in his pocket, feeling his insides vibrate with anticipation. She has no idea he's already here. He quietly walked through the hallway, noticing her bag and shoes at the entrance, everything as usual. But as he took a step towards the living room, a sound stopped him. Laughter. Low, masculine, coming not from the TV, but from somewhere above. Alex froze, listening. Then another sound, Susan's voice, muffled but clearly pleased. with that intonation he knew all too well. She talked to him like that when they were alone, in a good mood. His heart twitched, but his mind immediately turned on. Maybe it's her brother? No, Mike lives in California and he didn't come. Girlfriend with her husband. But why then from above, from the bedroom? Alex squeezed the tulips until the paper crunched and slowly moved towards the stairs. Every step sounded in my ears like the blow of a hammer. He was still trying to figure out an explanation. Maybe she had turned on some video, or maybe it was a neighbor who had come by to pick up the tools he had borrowed last week. But the laughter repeated, and now he was sure it was not a TV. It was a living person. He climbed to the second floor, feeling his palms become damp. The door to their bedroom was slightly open, and the light from the lamp fell into the corridor in a thin strip. Alex stopped at the threshold, listening. Susan's voice became louder. "Stop tickling me." She laughed, and there was something intimate in this laugh, something that was not intended for him. And then a man's voice deep, with a slight hoarseness. "What, you don't like it?" Alex recognized him instantly. Thomas Reed, Volume, her ex. The same guy with whom she broke up a year before they met, but whom she sometimes mentioned casually, with slight nostalgia. Auto mechanic, motorcycle enthusiast. Too wild for her, she said. Alex had seen him a couple of times at some parties, tall, with tattoos on his arms and that self-confidence that always made his teeth ache. He pushed the door open and time seemed to slow down. Susan was lying on their bed, the same one where they had slept the night before, where he had kissed her good night. Her blouse was unbuttoned, her hair was disheveled, and Tom was sitting next to her, shirtless, with a grin on his face. His hand was on her thigh, and on the bedside table there was a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Their glasses. Alex froze, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. The tulips fell from his hand, the paper rustling on the floor. Susan turned her head and saw him. Her eyes widened and her mouth parted, but she didn't say anything. Tom turned around too, and his grin turned into surprise, and then something like irritation. "Alex." Susan finally squeezed out, pulling her blouse towards her. What are you doing here?" He looked at them, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. It was not a dream, not a joke, not a mistake. His wife, with Tom, in their bedroom. The day he was going to surprise her with a trip. All the words he had been preparing, "The business trip is canceled. Get ready, we're going to Lakewood," were stuck in his throat like a lump. "Just a second," he said finally, raising his hand as if to stop them. The voice sounded strange, alien, as if it belonged to someone else. He took his phone out of his pocket, turned on the camera, and took a photo with one quick press. A flash lit up the room and Susan screamed. "What are you doing?" Tom jumped out of bed, clenching his fists. "Hey, idiot, put your phone away." But Alex didn't look at him. He looked at Susan, who was still sitting there, clutching her blouse to her chest, with a face full of panic and something else, guilt. Fear? He couldn't make it out. "Susan," he said, and his voice wavered, but he pulled himself together. "Just don't say, please. It's not what you think. There is no need to think here. Just seeing it is enough." She opened her mouth, but didn't say anything. Tom stepped forward, but Alex raised his hand to stop him. "No need, Tom. Don't make it worse." He turned to the closet, opened the door, and took out the same suitcase that he had packed in the morning. The one who was supposed to go with them to Lakewood. Now he seemed ridiculous, almost funny. "Alex, wait." Susan finally stood up, wrapping her blouse around her. "I can explain." "Explain?" He turned around, and there was something cold in his eyes that she had not seen before. "What is there to explain, Suze? You missed me, didn't you? Have you decided to do something interesting?" "That's not true." She stepped towards him, but he retreated. "I didn't want to." "I didn't want to," he nodded, as if agreeing. "Certainly. I just accidentally called Tom, accidentally opened the wine, accidentally ended up in our bed with him. Happens." Tom snorted, but remained silent, crossing his arms over his chest. Alex glanced at him short, sharp, like a blade. Then he looked at Susan again. "I thought this would be the best April Fool's Day," he said quietly, almost under his breath. but it looks like the joke got out of hand. He picked up the suitcase, turned, and walked towards the door. Susan shouted at his back, "Alex, please, let's talk." But he didn't stop. Going downstairs, he threw the tulips on the floor in the hallway. Their yellow petals looked ridiculous against the background of this nightmare. The door slammed behind him, and he found himself outside, where the air suddenly seemed too cold. He got into the car, started the engine, and just sat there, staring into space. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but there were no tears, only emptiness, sharp, like a shard of glass. He took out his phone, opened his contacts, and found Dev. I dialed the number, not thinking what he would say. Dev responded almost immediately. "Well, hero of the day, how was the surprise?" Alex swallowed, feeling his voice break. "Dev, you were right," he said. "She threw a party, just not with your girlfriends." There was silence on the other end, and then Dev exhaled. "Crap. What's happened?" "Susan. With Tom. In our bedroom." The words came out in short, chopped phrases. "I saw everything." "Lord, Alex." Dev fell silent, and then added, "Where are you?" "In the car, in front of the house." "Sit there. I'll come now." "No need." Alex shook his head, although Dev didn't see it. The door of the house opened, and Susan appeared on the threshold. She was wearing the same blouse, now buttoned, but barefoot, with disheveled hair. She looked at the car, then stepped forward as if about to approach. Alex tensed, but remained in place. She stopped at the edge of the path, hugging herself with her arms as if she were cold. Her face was pale, her eyes were shining tears. He couldn't see in the twilight. Part of him wanted to go out, ask what she would say, but the other part, a big part, just wanted to leave. Alex told David that he would call back and hung up. Oh, lowered the window, and she shouted, "Alex, please come back. We need to talk." The voice trembled, but he heard in it not only guilt, but also something else, fear, despair. He didn't know and didn't want to find out. Instead, he leaned towards the window and said, trying to keep his voice level, "Why did you stop? Continue. I won't bother you anymore." She froze, her mouth open, but said nothing. Alex watched as her shoulders slumped, as if the words had hit her harder than she expected. He didn't wait for an answer. He rolled up the window, put the car in gear, and drove out into the street. In the rearview mirror, she remained standing, a small figure against the background of their house, which suddenly became alien. He drove without a destination, just along the familiar streets of Arlington Heights. Familiar houses, lawns, and lanterns flashed past, just beginning to light up. The spring evening was quiet, almost peaceful, and this infuriated him even more. The world didn't collapse for everyone else, just for him. He turned on the radio, but Sweet Home Chicago, their song hit his nerves, and he turned it off with such force that he almost broke the button. The silence returned, and with it came a decision. Lakewood, he could still go there. The room has been booked, and the money has been paid. Why not? He won't let this day take everything from him. Let Susan sit at home with, or without Tom, he doesn't care. He'll take the weekend he deserves and spend it however he wants. But it would be too lousy for one. He needed someone to pull him out of this hole, and he knew who it would be. Alex took out his phone and dialed Dev again. He answered almost instantly, as if he was waiting for a call. "Where are you?" Dev's voice was tense, without the usual mockery. "I was already getting ready to go to you." "Don't," Alex exhaled, feeling his throat constrict. "I have a better idea. Will you join me at Lakewood?" "What?" Dev fell silent, digesting. "Are you serious?" "Seriously." Alex turned onto the highway leading to the city center. "They shouldn't waste their money in vain. I'm going there. 1 room for 2, spot, drinks. Are you in?" There was silence on the other end, and then Dev cleared his throat. "So are you going or not?" "I'm on my way," Dev answered without hesitation, "only on one condition." "Which one?" "You pay for everything." A shadow of his usual grin appeared in Dev's voice. "And don't count on the sex you were planning on getting from Susan. I, of course, am your friend, but I'm not ready to console you like that." Alex laughed for the first time in the last half hour, and it was like a breath of air. The pain did not go away, But Dev's voice, his stupid joke, pulled him out of the emptiness into which he was falling. "You're an idiot, David Crawford," he said, feeling the corners of his lips tremble. "Pack your things. I'll pick you up in 20 minutes. "I'm already getting ready," Dev chuckled. "And Alex, hang in there, okay? We'll figure it out." "We'll figure it out," he repeated, although he wasn't sure what that meant. He hung up, threw the phone on the seat, and accelerated. The road led him away from home, away from Susan, away from everything he had considered his for 5 years. The suitcase lay in the back seat, the same one that he had packed in the morning with such hope. Now he was traveling not with his wife, but with a friend, not for the sake of romance, but for the sake of salvation. He turned to Dev's apartment, which was 10 minutes from his office, a small brick building overlooking a gas station. Dev was already standing at the entrance, with a backpack over his shoulder and a bottle of beer in his hand. Seeing the car, he waved and approached. "You look like crap," he said, getting into the passenger seat and throwing the backpack back. "Thank you," Alex chuckled. "You're not Miss America either. But I'm sober and ready to get you out." Dev opened the beer and took a sip. "Let's go, old man. Lakewood is waiting." Alex nodded, drove onto the highway, and turned on the headlights. The road ahead was dark, but he knew where he was going. Not home, not to her, and to a place where he can forget, at least for a couple of days, that his world has just collapsed. Alex Miller drove his Ford down I-94 away from Chicago, gripping the steering wheel as if it would keep him from falling into the abyss. The night of April 1st fell over Illinois like a heavy dark blanket, and the headlights snatched out of the darkness only strips of asphalt and rare road signs. David Crawford sat nearby in the passenger seat, sipping from a bottle of beer he had grabbed from home. His backpack was lying in the back seat next to Alex's suitcase, the one that was supposed to go to Lakewood with Susan. Now, instead of a romantic weekend with his wife, he was waiting for an escape with his best friend, and this thought was both bitter and saving. "Okay, let's do it again," Dev said, turning to him. His voice was a little louder than usual to cover the noise of the engine. "You come home, and she's there with this. What's his name? Tom? So what next?" Alex glanced at him briefly, but didn't answer right away. He didn't want to retell it again. The picture was already standing before his eyes, like a still from a movie that he couldn't turn off. Susan on their bed, Tom with his stupid grin, wine in their glasses. But Dev looked at him with such stubborn curiosity that it was useless to remain silent. "I got in," he began, looking at the road. "I hear laughter from the bedroom. I get up, open the door, and there they are. She's wearing an unbuttoned blouse. He's shirtless. All. Dev raised an eyebrow. "You said you took a photo, and something about not what you think. How was it?" Alex pressed his lips together, feeling his throat tighten again. He exhaled through his nose, trying to keep his voice level. "I said, 'Just a second,' took out my phone, clicked them. She screamed. He jumped up as if he was going to attack me. And then I told her not to say that nonsense about not what you think. Because there's no need to think here, everything is in plain sight." Dev whistled, leaning back in his seat. "Damn, old man. It's like a scene from some thriller. You are a real hero, cold, calm, with sarcasm. I probably would have just smashed his face." "I wanted to," Alex admitted, and his fingers trembled on the steering wheel. "But what's the point? She would still stay with him. Or I would kick him out and then cry into my vest. I wanted neither one nor the other." "I understand," Dev nodded, taking another sip of beer. "And then you just left. With a suitcase?" "Yes." He told them to continue and left. "She ran out after me, shouting something, but I got into the car and drove away." "Cool." Dev shook his head. "No, really, it's cool. You could have caused drama, but instead you just left. This is the level." Alex chuckled, but the laugh came out dry, almost painful. The level of an idiot who didn't notice for 5 years that his wife missed her ex. "Hey, don't start." Dev poked him in the shoulder with the bottle. "You're not an idiot. She's a bitch who didn't appreciate what she had. It's her fault, not yours." Alex remained silent. Dev's words were logical. but they did not remove the weight from his chest. He trusted her. 5 years. For 5 damn years he thought they were together against the world, and she took it and crossed it out one evening. He remembered her voice on the phone, "I'm bored without you," and felt everything twist inside. She lied to his face while Tom was probably already in the house, or was waiting around the corner. This thought made him want to hit the steering wheel, but he restrained himself. "Let's play some music," he said instead, nodding to the radio. "I don't want to think about it." Dev nodded, put the beer in the cup holder, and leaned towards the radio. A second later, a sharp guitar riff filled the salon, "Sweet Child O' Mine" by Guns N' Roses. Alex winced. "Seriously, can't you do something a little tougher? This is a classic, old man." Dev turned up the volume. "But okay, hold on." He changed the station, and after a couple of seconds it's Back in Black started playing heavy, loud, like a hammer blow. Alex nodded, feeling the bass pierce right through him. This was what was needed to drown out my thoughts, to shake her voice, her face, her lies out of my head. Dev started singing along, off-key and loudly, waving his arms like he was at a concert. Alex couldn't stand it and laughed for the first time that evening. It was real laughter, and not a bitter grimace. "You're an idiot," he said, shaking his head. "But you're an idiot," Dev grinned. "Sing, come on. Let off some steam." Alex shook his head, but after a couple of lines, he still picked up the chorus, almost shouting along with the guitar. It was stupid, childish, but it helped. Music filled the car, displacing the silence, and for a few minutes he could pretend everything was fine. The journey to Lakewood took a little over an hour. The highway gave way to a narrow two-lane highway surrounded by forest. The headlights picked out the pine trees and the occasional sign until a turn with a wooden sign appeared ahead, Lakewood Country Club. Alex slowed down, turned onto the gravel road, and a couple of minutes later drove out to the main entrance. The club looked exactly as it did on the website, a large wooden building with a pointed roof, surrounded by cottages, and a lake glistening in the darkness under the light of the lanterns. Even at night, the place breathed peace and luxury, and Alex for a second regretted that he had not come here for the purpose that he had planned. "Well, wow," Dev whistled, looking out the window. "Are you sure you wanted to come here with Susan? It's just a honeymoon." "I wanted to." Alex turned off the engine and leaned back in the seat. "This is our honeymoon now, idiot." "Oh, I'm flattered," Dev laughed, slapping him on the shoulder. "Okay, let's go check in. I hope there's a bar there." They got out of the car, took their things, Alex's suitcase and Dev's backpack, and headed towards the main building. It was warm inside, smelling of wood and something sweet like cinnamon. Behind the reception desk stood a woman of about 30, slender, with dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. The badge read, "Catherine Lawson, Manager." She looked up from her laptop and smiled. "Good evening, gentlemen. How can I help?" "I have a reservation." Alex put his suitcase on the floor and took out his phone to show confirmation. "Alex Miller, number for 2, from 1 to 3. Catherine nodded, quickly scanned the keyboard, and looked at him with mild curiosity. "Yes, that's right. Suite with lake view, spa package for tomorrow. Welcome to Lakewood." She handed him the key card and brochure. "The bar is open until midnight if you want a drink." "We'll want to." Dev winked at her, and she smiled slightly in response. "Great. Your cottage is number 7, down the path to the left. If you need anything, call the reception." "Thank you." Alex took the key and nodded. They went outside, and the cold night air hit their faces, driving away the remnants of numbness. The path to the cottage was paved with stone, illuminated by lanterns, and after a couple of minutes, they were already standing in front of a wooden door with the number 7. It was cozy inside a large bed, a sofa, a fireplace already lit, and a window overlooking the lake. There was a bottle of champagne on the table, the same one he ordered for Susan. "Well, at least something went according to plan," he said, looking at the bottle. "That's for sure." Dev threw his backpack on the sofa and walked up to the table. "Are we opening? Or do you want to cry over her alone?" "Open it." Alex put the suitcase against the wall and sat down on the sofa. "I'll cry tomorrow." Dev chuckled, took 2 glasses from the cabinet and deftly opened the champagne. The cork popped, foam spilled onto the table, and he laughed. "Here's to a new start, old man," he said, handing the glass to Alex. "To a new start," he repeated, accepting the glass. They clinked glasses and Alex took a sip, feeling the bubbles burn his throat. This wasn't the evening he had planned, but damn, it was better than sitting at home staring at the wall. "You know," Dev sat down next to him, stretching out his legs, "I'm still glad that you called me. This place is a head-scratcher, and I'm better than Susan, admit it." "You snore louder," Alex chuckled. "But yes, you're in." They laughed, and for the first time that day, Alex felt like he could survive the night. Friendship won't replace what he lost, but it kept him going, and Lakewood was just the beginning. Alex Miller and David Crawford sat in the cozy Lakewood cottage number 7, drinking champagne that was intended for a very different evening. The fire in the fireplace crackled, casting warm reflections on the wooden walls, and outside the window the lake lay like a black mirror under the starry sky. The bottle emptied faster than they expected, and Dev, putting down his glass, clapped his hands. "That's it, old man. Stop mooching by the fireplace," he said, getting up from the sofa. "Catherine said the bar is open until midnight. Let's go and have something stronger. Champagne is for girls and broken hearts, but we are men on vacation here." Alex chuckled, looking at the empty glass in his hand. He didn't want to argue. The champagne actually left a slight bitter aftertaste, reminding him of who he ordered it for. Whiskey or beer sounded better, and sitting alone thinking about Susan was the last thing he wanted. "Okay," he stood up, glancing at his watch. 10:30. "But if you get drunk and start singing, I'll kick you out to sleep on the street." "I promise to sing only with a guitar," Dev grinned, grabbing his jacket. "If there is a guitar there." Went. They walked out of the cottage, and the cold night air hit their faces, driving away the remaining heat from the fireplace. The path to the main building was lit by lanterns, and the gravel crushed underfoot. Alex put his hands in his jeans pockets, feeling the wind sneaking under his jacket. The night was clear, the stars sparkled over the forest, and somewhere in the distance an owl hooted. This place was too beautiful for his mood, but he decided that it was for the best. At least something should please the eye. The bar was located in the main building, in a spacious room with a high ceiling and large windows overlooking the lake. It was warm and noisy inside. Several tables were occupied by guests. Soft music was playing in the corner, something from old jazz, and behind the counter the bartender, a guy of about 25, was wiping glasses. Wooden beams, soft lamplight, and the smell of whiskey created an atmosphere in which you could forget about your problems. Alex and Dev sat down at the bar, and Dev immediately waved to the bartender. "2 whiskeys," he said. "Jameson, if there is one. And don't skimp on the ice." "It will be done." The bartender nodded and turned to the shelves. Alex looked around. There were about 10 people in the bar, a middle-aged couple at the window, a group of friends laughing at something at a table, and a lone guy with a laptop in the corner. Just a normal Friday night at the country club. He turned his gaze to Dev, who was already twirling the glass coaster in his hands. "Well," Dev looked at him with a slight grin, "how do you feel? First evening of freedom." "Freedom." Alex raised an eyebrow. "So far it looks like the first evening of hell." "Hey, don't force it," Dev poked him with his elbow. "You've escaped this crap. You're sitting in a fancy place with your best friend and whiskey on the way. This is a victory, old man." The bartender placed 2 glasses of whiskey in front of them, and the ice clinked softly against the glass. Alex took a sip, and felt the warmth spread down his throat. Jameson was harsh, but pleasant, better than champagne, for sure. "Maybe it's a victory," he said, looking at the glass, "but I don't feel it yet." "That's because you're still sober." Dev raised his glass. "For you, Alex, and for all the bitches to remain in the past." Alex grinned, clinked his glass with it, and took another sip. The whiskey burned more, and he decided that Dev was right. He needed to get drunk. Not to the point of losing consciousness, but enough to drown out the image from the bedroom that was still flashing before my eyes. They drank more, and Dev started chatting as usual. You know, I always thought Susan was too good for you, he said, twirling the glass in his hands. But it seems you were too good for her. Who would have thought that she was so? Well, you get the idea. I don't understand, Alex shook his head. I still don't understand. 5 years, Dev. We were a normal couple. Or I was a blind idiot. You were a normal guy who trusted her, Dev shrugged, and she's a fool who didn't appreciate it. Forget it. She is now with Tom, letting him suffer with her. Tom, Alex snorted, the name leaving a bitter aftertaste. This idiot didn't even try to justify himself. Just sat there like a king. Because he's a cretin, Dev finished his whiskey and waved to the bartender for more. Well done for not hitting him. I wouldn't hold back. I thought about that too, Alex admitted, twirling the glass in his hands. But then I decided it wasn't worth it. Let them figure it out themselves. This is the spirit. Dev slapped him on the back. Now let's talk about something fun. For example, about how tomorrow I will fish on this lake, and you will whine that it is cold. I'm not whining, Alex laughed, and I know how to fish better than you. Do you remember your last trip? You only caught seaweed. It was a tactic, Dev grinned. I lured fish for you. They continued to tease each other, and Alex felt the weight in his chest ease a little. The whiskey helped, but Dev helped more his stupid jokes, his presence. He was right. This is not the end of the world, but the beginning of something else. Maybe not the way he planned, but she started anyway. The bar door opened and Catherine Lawson, the manager they had seen at the reception, entered the room. Now she was without a badge, in dark jeans and a light sweater, with her hair down. She looked younger than she did in uniform, and moved with an ease that suggested she was used to being on her feet all day. Catherine walked up to the counter and said something to the bartender, who nodded, pouring her a glass of wine. Then she turned around and noticed them. "Gentlemen from the 7th cottage," she said, coming closer with a smile. "How did you like your first evening?" "I'm not complaining yet," Dev raised his glass. "The whiskey is excellent. The company is even better." "I'm glad to hear." She looked at Alex, and her gaze lingered a little longer than necessary. "And you, Mr. Miller? Everything is fine?" "Alex," he corrected, feeling her dark eyes seem to scan him. "Yes, everything is fine. Thank you for the warm welcome." "Just Katie," she smiled wider, "and you're welcome. You look like you've escaped from prison. Or something worse." "From marriage," Dev chuckled, and Alex glanced at him, promising reprisal. "Oh," Katie raised an eyebrow, but did not pursue the topic. "Well, then you're in a good place. Here you can hide from everything." "That's the plan," Alex nodded, taking a sip of whiskey. "Hide and get drunk." She laughed quietly but sincerely, and for some reason this sound seemed pleasant to him. Not annoying like everything else today. "Then I won't interfere," she said, retreating to the counter. "But if anything happens, the bar closes in an hour. Hurry up." "We'll make it," Dev winked at her, and she left, leaving behind a light trail of perfume, something with a hint of citrus. "Well, you idiot," Alex turned to him. "What did you say about marriage?" "And what?" Dev shrugged. "This is true. And she's cute. Maybe you should take a break." "I'm not going to get distracted." Alex rolled his eyes. "I have no time for that now." As you know, Deb finished the second glass and ordered another. "But she clearly has a crush on you. Those eyes, that Mr. Miller. I know what I'm talking about." "You only know how to get drunk," Alex grinned, but the thought flashed through his head that Katie really looked at him somehow differently. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something else. He pushed the thought away. It was not the time or place. They sat at the bar until closing, drinking whiskey and talking about nonsense baseball, work, how Dev once got stuck in an elevator with his boss and panicked like a girl. Alex laughed, feeling the alcohol blurring edges of pain. When the bartender announced last orders, they each took a beer down the path and returned to the cottage. "The first evening is over," said Dev, plopping down on the sofa with a bottle in his hand. "You're still alive. Congratulations." "Thank you." Alex sat down next to him, looking at the fire in the fireplace. "I couldn't have done it without you." I know, Dev grinned. I'm your lifeline, old man. Sleep well. Alex Miller woke up to the sound of snoring coming from the couch in their Lakewood cottage. David Crawford slept, propped up on pillows, with one leg dangling to the floor and an empty bottle of beer clutched in his hand. The morning light filtered through the curtains, illuminating the room with soft gold, and outside the window the lake sparkled under the first rays of the sun. Alex rubbed his eyes, feeling a heaviness in his head. Yesterday's whiskey left behind a slight hangover, but nothing terrible. He stood up, trying not to break the floorboards, and went to the window. The forest around the club was quiet, only the birds chirped somewhere in the branches. It was beautiful, too beautiful for the chaos that was going on inside him. The clock on the nightstand showed 7:45. It was early, but I didn't want to sleep any further. He walked into the cottage's small kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and pulled out 2 mugs. The smell of coffee began to fill the room, and Dev stirred, muttering something inaudible. "Wake up, fisherman," Alex said, pouring coffee. "Yesterday you boasted that you would catch me breakfast." Dev opened one eye, looked at him with feigned indignation, and sat up, rubbing his neck. "I didn't brag, I promised." His voice was hoarse from sleep and whiskey. "But if you're waiting for salmon, then it's in vain. Maximum perch." "Perch will do." Alex handed him the mug. "Drink and get ready. The morning is too good to lie around." Dev took the coffee, took a sip, and winced. "You're unbearable when you're cheerful. Okay, let's go fishing. But if I fall into the water, you pull me out." "Agreed," Alex grinned. He felt better than not great, but better. The night in the bar, whiskey and Dev's stupid jokes had done their job. The pain from Susan's betrayal still sat in her chest, but it no longer cut so sharply. Maybe this place helped, or maybe it was just time. They finished their coffee, collected their gear, fishing rods, and a box of bait, which they found in the cottage closet, and went outside. The morning was cool, the air smelled of pine trees and water. They walked down to the dock where there were several boats available for guests. Alex chose a small wooden one with oars, nothing complicated, just to get out into the middle of the lake. Dev threw the gear into the boat and sat on the stern while Alex untied the rope. "Are you sure you can row?" Dev asked, watching Alex fiddle with the oars. "Otherwise, I don't want to drown because of your romance with nature." "I can." Alex pushed the boat away from the pier and began to row. "Susan and I once took a boat on Lake Michigan. I did it." He fell silent, realizing that he had mentioned her. Dev noticed this, but didn't say anything. He just nodded and began to unwind the fishing rod. The boat glided slowly through the water, leaving light waves behind it. The lake was calm, almost mirror-like, and the sun rose higher and higher, warming the air. They stopped in the middle of the water, 100 meters from the shore, where the Lakewood cottages looked like toys against the background of the forest. "Well," Dev put a worm on a hook and cast out the fishing rod. "Let's fish. I bet you $10 that I'll be the first to catch something." "Accepted." Alex followed his example, casting his fishing rod. The water splashed, the line stretched, and they fell silent, looking at the floats. The silence was pleasant, broken only by the light splash of waves on the side and the occasional cries of seagulls. Alex leaned back, feeling the sun warm his face. For the first time in 24 hours, he could just breathe without thinking about what happened yesterday. But Dev, as always, did not let the silence drag on. "You know," he said, looking at the water, "marriage is like fishing. Sometimes the bite is not what you expect. You thought you had a pike there, but you pulled out a shark." Alex snorted, shaking his head. "You're quite a philosopher, Dev." "Is this a metaphor for Susan?" "Yeah," Dev grinned. "She's a shark, old man. Beautiful, but with teeth. And you were too good a bait." "Maybe so," Alex shrugged, looking at the float. "I really thought we were fine." "Well, not perfect, but okay. And I don't even know when it started." "Maybe it never started." Dev pulled the fishing rod, checking the line. "Maybe it was just an impulse. She said she missed you, you left, and then Tom turned up." "Pulse. Impulse." Alex repeated this word, tasting it. 5 years of marriage, and she decides to impulsively sleep with her ex. It's not an impulse, Dev. It's a choice. Well, her choice, Dev nodded, and her mistake. What do you have to do with it? Even though I trusted her, Alex felt his voice tremble and fell silent, looking at the water. The float swung, but he did not pull, it was too shallow. I blindly believed that we were a team, and she took me and crossed me out. Dev looked at him, and something serious flashed in his eyes, rare for him. Listen, he said, lowering the fishing rod. You are not blind. You are a normal guy who thought his wife was normal too. It's not your fault that she turned out to be different. And guess what? I would trust her too. She knew how to pretend. Alex nodded, feeling Dev's words sink in somewhere inside him. Maybe he's right. Susan has always been a good actress, her sad voice in the morning, her "I'm bored without you" on the phone. He bought it because he wanted to believe, and now he was paying for it. What would you do? He asked, looking at his friend. What if your girlfriend did this? I don't have girls, Dev grinned. But if there was, I don't know. Probably would have broken something. Or I would get drunk right there. You're cooler than me, old man. He left with a suitcase like a king. A king without a kingdom, Alex chuckled, but there was no bitterness in his voice. Okay, enough about her. Let's talk about you. Why are you still alone? Dev fell silent, looking at the water. The float swung, but he did not react. Then he shrugged. Don't know. I'm probably afraid, he said quietly. I'm afraid it will be like yours, or like my old people 20 years together, and then divorce and hatred. It's easier alone. Alex looked at him, surprised. Dev rarely talked about personal things, he usually laughed it off or changed the topic. But now there was a sincerity in his voice that Alex had not expected. You are afraid of loneliness, but you live alone, he said. This is somehow illogical. Maybe so, Dev smiled, but the smile came out crooked. But I'm not alone. I have you, idiot, and beer, and this fish that seems to ignore us. Alex laughed, and the tension between them melted. They fell silent again, looking at the floats. A couple of minutes later, Dev took a bite, a sharp jerk, and he began to pull, cursing as the line tightened. Here it is, he shouted, pulling out a small perch. The fish fluttered, its scales glistening in the sun. $10 are mine, old man. To hell with you, Alex smiled, watching Dev take the perch off the hook. But this is not breakfast. Too small. This is the beginning. Dev threw the fish back into the water. The next one will be bigger. They continued fishing for another hour, catching a couple more perch and one pike, which Alex pulled out with a triumphant, "Who's the whiner?" The sun rose higher, warming the boat, and a light wind sent ripples across the lake. They talked about nonsense about work, about how Bob fell asleep in a meeting one day, about plans for the summer. But that brief moment of honesty stayed with Alex. Dev was right. They were not alone. He had a friend who dropped everything and came here with him, who was now sitting in this boat and fooling around to get him out of the hole. You know, Alex said as they began to row back to the shore, you really saved me yesterday. If I had stayed at home, I probably would have gone crazy. I know, Dev winked, taking up the second oar. I'm your guardian angel, old man. Tall just with beer instead of wings. Better than nothing, Alex smiled, and for the first time in 2 days, it was a real smile, not a mask. They moored to the shore, handed over the boat, and returned to the cottage, carrying the catch-3 fish, which they decided to fry for dinner. The morning didn't go as he had planned with Susan, but it was a good one. Friendship with Dev, this boat, this lake, all this kept him afloat. And he knew that there was still a day ahead that they would spend together. It may not be a victory, but it's definitely not a defeat. The sun set behind the forest surrounding Lakewood, and the evening of April 2nd enveloped the country club in a soft coolness. Alex Miller and David Crawford returned to their cottage after a morning on the lake, where they fried pike in their small kitchen. The fish turned out to be a little dry, but it went well with beer from the refrigerator. They spent the day lazily, sleeping a little after fishing, then walking along the lake, discussing how they would build a house here if they were rich. By evening, Alex felt almost human. The pain from Susan's betrayal was still sitting somewhere in the depths, but it became quieter, muffled by the sun, water, and Dev's chatter. When they left the cottage around 8, a fire was already burning in the main clearing of the club. It was one of those parties that Lakewood threw for guests, a big fire in the center, surrounded by wooden benches, a table with snacks, and a case of beer in an ice bath. Several people had already gathered, a middle-aged couple they had seen at the bar, a group of young guys with a guitar, and a few more singles warming themselves by the fire. Quiet music was playing from speakers hidden somewhere in the bushes, something from country music, with guitars strumming and light vocals. Alex and Dev each took a bottle of beer from the box cold, with drops of water on the glass, and sat on the bench by the fire. Well, Dev uncorked the bottle on the edge of the bench and took a sip, the second evening of freedom. How does it feel? Better than yesterday. Alex opened his beer and looked at the fire. The flame crackled, throwing sparks into the dark sky, and the warmth pleasantly drove away the cold from the hands. Thank you for getting me out here. You're welcome, Dev shrugged. I told you, I'm your lifeline. And then, who would refuse free beer and a fire? Alex chuckled as he took a sip. The beer was light, bitter, and the cold chilled to the bones in a good way. He looked at the fire, feeling his thoughts about Susan recede even further. The morning at the lake with Dev, their conversation about life, stupid jokes, all this worked like a medicine. Not a complete cure, but at least a respite. You know, he said, looking at the flames, I still can't believe she did it. But today, at least, I don't want to break her face. Progress, Dev nodded with feigned seriousness. Yesterday, you wanted to break Tom's face. Today, she wanted to break it. Tomorrow, maybe you'll just mentally tell her to go to hell, and that's it. I'm already sending it, Alex chuckled, but it doesn't help yet. Give me time, Dev patted him on the shoulder. And beer? It helps too. They laughed, and Alex felt the warmth from the fire and friendship mix inside, displacing the cold. At that moment, Catherine Lawson, Katie, as she introduced herself, approached the fire. She was wearing jeans and a dark green jacket, with a bottle of beer in her hand, and her dark hair curled slightly from the humidity of the evening air. She noticed them, smiled, and came closer. You again, she said, sitting down on the bench next to Alex. Have you decided to burn all the alcohol reserves in the club? That's the plan, Dev winked at her. But for now, we're just drinking beer. We'll save the whiskey for the finale. Wise, Katie laughed and looked at Alex. How are you, Alex? You look better than yesterday. I feel better, he nodded, meeting her gaze. Her eyes were dark, almost black in the firelight, and there was something warm in them, but not intrusive. Thank you for the bar. And for this, he nodded towards the fire. You're welcome, she shrugged. It's my job to make sure the guests don't get bored. Although you seem to be coping on your own. We're trying, Dev took a sip of beer. But if you have a guitar, I'm ready to arrange a concert. Alex will confirm that I am a karaoke star. I won't confirm, Alex shook his head, but smiled. You are a star only in your dreams. Katie laughed, and her laughter was light, like the wind over the lake. She leaned back, looking at the fire, and Alex noticed how the reflection of the flames played on her face. She was pretty, not in a flashy way, but calmly, with the confidence that comes with experience. He pushed the thought away. This was not the time to think about such things, but still found himself staring at her a little longer than necessary. Do you rest or work? He asked to fill the pause. Both, Katie turned to him. I'm a manager, so I'm always on my feet. But such evenings are also a rest for me. I love bonfires. Reminds me of childhood. Where did you grow up? Dev asked, clearly deciding to continue the conversation. In Michigan, she took a sip of beer. A small town near Lake Huron. Summer, bonfires, fishing. Then she moved here, got divorced, bought a dog, and this job. Divorced? Dev raised an eyebrow, and Alex glanced at him, saying, don't interfere. But Katie just grinned. Yeah, she said, looking at the fire. My ex went to see his secretary. Classic. I took the dog and half the money. He took his new life. Fair deal. Is a dog better? Alex asked, and a shadow of sarcasm flashed in his voice, which he did not have time to remove. Or rather, Katie looked at him with a slight smile, and he doesn't snore, unlike some. Are you talking about me? Dev pretended to be offended. I actually sleep quietly. I don't believe it, she shook her head, and they all laughed. The conversation flowed as easily as bottled beer about dogs, about work, about how Katie once got stuck in the snow in the club's driveway and had to call a tractor. Alex listened, occasionally adding his own comments, and felt how her presence added something new to the evening. Not tension, but warmth, light, unobtrusive, like the fire itself. And you too, Katie nodded at them. Have you been friends for a long time? Since college, Dev answered. I pulled him out of the dorm when he almost failed his statistics exam. Since then, he has been in my debt. You're exaggerating, Alex rolled his eyes. I would pass. You were just the loudest person in that room. And saved you, Dev winked at Katie. He's still grateful to me. I even brought it to Lakewood. It's not gratitude, it's despair, Alex said, and Katie laughed again. Her gaze lingered on him, and he felt something move inside, not strong, but noticeable. Sparks are like from a fire, only different. He averted his eyes, pretending to look at the fire. Desperation or not, she said, you're doing a good job here. Many people come here to lick their wounds, but not everyone takes such a friend with them. I'm unique, Dev raised the bottle, as if clinking glasses with it. Ask Alex, he will confirm. I will confirm, Alex nodded, and there was more warmth in his voice than he expected. Without him, I would now be sitting at home and staring at the wall. Well, then for friendship, Katie raised her beer, and they clinked glasses, glass clinked against glass, and sparks from the fire flew up. They drank, and the conversation continued light, without pressure. Katie told how her dog, a Labrador named Max, once stole half the ham from the guest's table, and Dev told the story of how he accidentally set the barbecue on fire at his parents' party. Alex laughed, feeling the evening getting better. When a group of guys with a guitar started playing something from the Eagles' Hotel California, Dev jumped up. This is my chance, he said, finishing his beer. I'll go and sing. Are you with me? No, really, Alex shook his head. I'd rather listen from here. I passed too, Katie smiled, but good luck. Dev went to the fire, where he was greeted with applause, and soon his voice, loud and slightly out of tune, joined the guitar. Alex and Katie remained on the bench, looking at him. Is he always like this? She asked, nodding at Dev. Always, Alex nodded. This is his superpower. Can pull you out of any hole. You're lucky, she said quietly, and there was something sincere in her voice. She looked at him, and their eyes met for a second, longer than was necessary for simple politeness. Alex felt warmth, not from the fire, but from her, and quickly looked away. Yes, lucky, he said, taking a sip of beer. What about you and Max? Also, she smiled, he is better than any man. Bye. They laughed, and the evening continued. Dev returned half an hour later, proud of himself, although his singing caused more laughter than applause. They finished their beer, chatted some more, and went back to their cottages around midnight. Wake up, karaoke hero, Dev said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. We're leaving in a couple of hours. Dev opened his eyes, sat up, rubbing his face, and looked at him with slight irritation. You're too cheerful for a man who drank beer by the fire yesterday, he muttered, accepting the mug. Let me die in peace. You're not dying, Alex sat on a chair by the window, looking at the lake. You're just lazy. Drink coffee, get ready. I don't want to get stuck in traffic on the way back. Traffic jam on Sunday morning. Dev snorted, but took a sip. You're paranoid. Okay, give me 10 minutes, and I'll be good as new. Alex nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. The morning was clear, the sky was blue, without a single cloud, and the sun was reflected in the water as in a mirror. He thought about how strange this weekend had turned out. He came here with a suitcase that he was packing for Susan, with a plan that collapsed in an instant. And now I was leaving with Dev, with a couple of caught fish in my memory and a slight feeling that life might not be over. It was not happiness that was still a long way off, but something close to peace. They finished their coffee, gathered their things, Alex's suitcase and Dev's backpack, and began cleaning the cottage. The empty beer bottles went into the trash, the fishing rods went back into the closet, and Alex threw the rest of the pike they didn't finish into a container by the path. Dev, as usual, was fooling around, trying to fold the blanket on the couch so that it looked decent, but in the end he just threw it in a lump. "Katie won't notice," he said, shrugging. "She's too busy to check the sofas." "Katie will notice," Alex shook his head, but did not shift the point. "She is a manager. She has a trained eye." "Oh, you're already protecting her," Dev grinned, winking. "Did you see how you were shot with your eyes by the fire? I really felt like a third wheel." "Don't start," Alex rolled his eyes, but the corners of his lips twitched. "We were just chatting. She's cute, but I'm not in that state." But in vain, Dev picked up the backpack. "She clearly has a crush on you." "Alex, how are you?" "Alex, you look better. I know these things." "You only know how to get drunk and sing out of tune." Alex took the suitcase and opened the door. "Let's go, philosopher." They went outside, and the morning air hit their faces fresh, with the smell of pine trees and water. The path to the main building was empty. Only a couple of guests walked past with suitcases, also getting ready to leave. Alex glanced at the lake, remembering yesterday's fishing, their conversation, Dev's frankness, the lightness that he felt then. This place gave him more than he expected, and not just because of nature. In the main building, they handed over the key to the reception. Catherine Lawson stood behind the counter, wearing the same uniform as the first day, her hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. She looked up from the papers and smiled when she saw them. "Are you leaving?" she asked, accepting the key card from Alex. "Yes," he nodded, putting the suitcase on the floor. "The weekend is over. Thanks for everything." "You're welcome." Katie looked at him with a slight squint, as if appraising him. "I hope you liked it. Look better than when you arrived." "It's all beer and fish," Dev winked at her, throwing his backpack over his shoulder. "And your fire, great stuff." "I'm glad it helped," she smiled, but her gaze returned to Alex. "And you, Alex, have you rested?" "Yes," he nodded, feeling her attention again, being drawn to something inside her, faint but noticeable. It was unexpectedly good. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She took a business card from the counter drawer and handed it to him. "If you decide to return, no joke, call. We have discounts for regular guests." Alex took the card, looking at her name, Catherine Lawson, manager, and phone number. Her fingers lightly touched him, and he felt a warmth he didn't expect. He put the card in his jacket pocket, trying not to give away that he had noticed this moment. "Thank you, Katie," he said, meeting her gaze. "Maybe I'll come back." "I'll wait," she smiled wider, and a spark flashed in her eyes, the same one that was there at the fire. Dev coughed, clearly holding back a grin, and Alex gave him a look that said, "Shut up." "Okay, let's go, old man." Dev patted him on the shoulder. "Otherwise, Katie will decide that we're staying forever." "Good luck to you," Katie nodded, returning to the papers. "And take care of each other." "Always," Dev answered, and they went outside to the car. Alex threw the suitcase into the trunk of the Ford, Dev threw the backpack in the back seat, and they got inside. The sun had already risen higher, illuminating the path back to the highway. Alex started the engine, but before driving off, he took the business card out of his pocket and looked at it again. Dev noticed this and grinned. "Wow, you're on it, old man," he said, leaning back in his seat. "I told you, she has a crush on you." "She's just being polite." Alex put the business card back in his pocket and put it in gear. "And I'm not going to start anything." "Bye," Dev winked, "but I bet you'll call her in a month. Or earlier." "Dream," Alex laughed, driving out onto the gravel road. "You better think about how to explain to Bob why we both disappeared for 2 days. Let's say we were fishing for him." Dev turned on the radio, and Back in Black thundered in the cabin again. "He will believe it. Or not. but he doesn't care. They drove back, discussing work, fishing, and how Dev almost fell into the lake while pulling a pike. Alex laughed, feeling like the road was taking him further and further away from what it was like on Friday. Lakewood was left behind, but he left something heavy in him, part of the pain that he brought with him. Dev talked non-stop, and Alex was grateful for that, for his voice, for his presence, for keeping him from drowning alone. "You know," he said as they pulled out onto the highway, "you really pulled me out of the shit." "I'm serious." "I know," Dev nodded, looking out the window. "I told you I'm your guardian angel, only without wings." "And with beer," Alex added, smiling. "And with beer," Dev confirmed, and they laughed. The road home was long, but not painful. Alex held the steering wheel, listening to music and teasing Dev about his fishing philosophy. He knew what awaited him in Chicago, Susan, a divorce, an empty house, but for the first time in those days, it didn't frighten him. He had Dev, a business card in his pocket, and 2 days that showed that life moves on. Maybe not the way he planned, but it's coming. Alex Miller turned onto his street in Arlington Heights around 5 p.m. on April 3rd, feeling the tension building inside him again. 2 days at Lakewood with David fishing, campfire, beer had given him a break, but now he was returning to reality, and it smelled of betrayal and an empty house. The sun was setting, turning the suburban houses soft pink, but to him it was just a background, familiar but foreign. He slowed down as he approached his house and noticed Susan's Honda Civic in the driveway. She's still here. His heart twitched, but he gripped the steering wheel, forcing himself to breathe evenly. "Well, that's all," Deb said from the passenger seat, looking out the window. "Home sweet home. Or not really." "Not really," Alex chuckled, parking the Ford next to her car. "Thank you for coming with me. Next is me." "Sure?" Dev turned to him, and there was a hint of concern in his voice. "I can stay. If she's there, I can. I don't know, stand by with the bat in case something happens." "No need," Alex shook his head, turning off the engine. "I'll sort it out. You've already done more than you need to." "Okay, old man," Dev patted him on the shoulder. "But if anything happens, call. I'm 10 minutes away." "Agreed," Alex nodded, and Dev got out of the car, taking his backpack from the back seat. He waved his hand and walked towards his apartment, leaving Alex alone in front of the house, which now seemed alien to him. Alex sat in the car for another minute, looking at the white walls and dark windows. The suitcase was in the trunk, the same one he'd taken to Lakewood, the one he'd packed for her. He didn't know what he was waiting for, that she had gone to her parents, to Tom, or that the house will be empty, as he hoped. But her car was parked here, and that meant she was inside. He exhaled, opened the door, and walked out, feeling the cold evening air sneaking under his jacket. Climbing onto the porch, he took out the keys, but the door was not locked. He pushed her and entered the hallway. The tulips he had thrown on Friday were still lying on the floor. The yellow petals had wilted. The paper was crumpled. The smell of the house, a mixture of coffee, her perfume, and something else he couldn't name, hit his nose, and Alex froze. The silence was heavy, but not complete. A slight rustling sound came from the living room, as if someone had turned the page of a book. He walked further, throwing his suitcase against the wall, and saw her. Susan sat on the living room couch, wearing a gray sweater and jeans, with her legs tucked under her. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red and tear-stained. On the table in front of her stood an empty cup and a crumpled handkerchief. She looked up when she heard his steps and froze, as if she had not expected to see him. "Alex?" Her voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. She stood up, clutching the handkerchief in her hands. "You're back." He stopped in the doorway, looking at her. She looked pathetic, not the confident, beautiful Susan he knew, but some broken version of herself. Tears, trembling hands, a guilty look. It was all too theatrical, too late. Alex felt the familiar mixture of pain and anger rising inside him, but he suppressed it, keeping his face stony. "Why the performance?" he asked, crossing his arms over his chest. The voice came out colder than he intended, but he didn't care. She blinked at him in surprise, as if she didn't understand the question. What performance? Her voice trembled. I, I was waiting for you. I didn't know when you would return. Did you wait? He snorted, and the sarcasm burst out of itself. Seriously, Suze, waited 2 days for me to return from a business trip, or while Tom leaves. She shuddered as if struck and lowered her eyes. The scarf in her hands crumpled even more. Tom left on Friday, she said quietly. After you left, I was here alone. Alone, he repeated, and there was so much venom in his voice that he felt it himself. What a touching story. So what did you do? Did you cry at our wedding? Or the fact that I caught you? Alex, please. She stepped towards him, but stopped when she saw how tense he was. I didn't want this. I don't know how this happened. Don't know? He raised an eyebrow, feeling how anger began to displace the pain. Let me remind you. You invited Tom while I was on a business trip. I drank wine with him and went to bed with him. It didn't happen, Suze. You did it. Her eyes filled with tears again, but he felt no pity, only fatigue. She opened her mouth to say something, but he raised his hand to stop her. No need, he said. I don't want to hear, it was an impulse, or I didn't want to. I saw everything I needed. She swallowed, looking at him with despair. Why did you come back? She asked suddenly, and her voice became louder. You were supposed to be on a business trip in Indianapolis. Why did you come home on Friday? Alex froze, looking at her. The question took him by surprise, and for a second he almost laughed, not from amusement, but from the absurdity. Did she really not understand? Or was she pretending? He exhaled, shaking his head, a hint of the joy with which he planned to surprise her flashing in his eyes. Are you serious? He said, and his voice became quieter, but sharper. You really don't know. She looked at him, not understanding anything, and he decided that this was the end. There's no point in keeping it to yourself anymore. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled printout of Lakewood's armor and tossed it onto the table in front of her. The paper fell next to her cup, and Susan stared at it, frowning. What is this? She asked, taking the sheet with trembling fingers. It was a joke, he said, his voice shaking with a mixture of sarcasm and pain. April Fool's, Suze. I didn't go on a business trip. I booked us a room at Lakewood, a Lakeview suite, spa, champagne. I wanted to surprise you, take you there for the weekend. I returned home earlier to say that the business trip is canceled and to take you away. But instead I found you with Tom. She looked up from the paper and her face went white. Tears flowed again, but now she did not try to wipe them away. Oh my God, she whispered, putting her hand to her mouth. Alex, Don't, he interrupted her, feeling how everything was shrinking inside. You asked why I came back. Here's why. April Fool's Day joke. Only I turned out to be a fool. She looked at him, and her tears dripped onto the printout, blurring the ink. Alex saw her tremble, her shoulders slump, but he felt nothing but emptiness. It was the end, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, like an exhalation. He turned to go into the kitchen, but her voice stopped him. I didn't want it to happen like this, she said, sobbing. I love you, Alex. Is it true? He stopped, but didn't turn around. Her words hung in the air, and he felt them cutting like a knife, not because he believed them, but because they were useless. You love me so much that you went to bed with Tom, he said quietly, almost under his breath. Great love, Suze. She didn't answer, she just sobbed louder, and Alex went into the kitchen. He poured. I drank some water from the tap and drank it in one gulp, feeling the cold creeping into my throat. It was getting dark outside the window, and he looked into emptiness until her footsteps died down somewhere in the living room. She was still here, but to him she no longer existed. Alex Miller stood at the kitchen window, watching the last rays of sunset disappear behind the houses of Arlington Heights. The cold glass of water in his hand was already warming up, but he did not notice it. His thoughts were occupied with Susan, sitting in the living room with tear-stained eyes and a crumpled printout of the Lakewood armor in her hands. Her sobs came through the open door, quiet and intermittent, but they didn't touch him the way they might have before. 2 days ago, he might have felt pity, a desire to hug her and listen. But now it was just noise, a background to the emptiness that settled in him after Friday. He put the glass on the counter and wiped his hands on his jeans, feeling the fatigue roll in like a wave. 2 days at Lakewood with Dev had given him strength, but coming home to this had drained it away again. He didn't want to shout, he didn't want drama, he just wanted it to end. Alex returned to the living room, where Susan was still sitting on the couch, hunched over as if she was being crushed by something heavy. The printout lay in front of her, crumpled and damp from tears, and the handkerchief lay on the floor. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her face scrunched up in another attempt to hold back her sobs. "Alex," she began, standing up. "I don't know what to say. I'm such a fool." "That's true," he nodded, crossing his arms over his chest. His voice was even, but sarcasm cut through his fatigue like the edge of a knife. "But come on, without self-flagellation. It doesn't suit you." She flinched, but didn't look away. Her eyes, red and shiny, were still beautiful. He hated himself for noticing that even now. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, stepping closer. "What happened to Tom? It was a mistake. I didn't think you'd come back. I thought you were on a business trip, and you decided that this was a great chance." He interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "While I'm in Indianapolis, you call Tom, open the wine, and go to bed with him. Makes sense, Suze. Very much like you." "No," she shook her head, and tears flowed down her cheeks again. "This is wrong. I didn't plan to. He just came in, we were talking, and then, I don't know how it happened." "You don't know," he repeated, and his voice became quieter, but sharper. "I know. I saw it. And I heard it. You laughed with him, Suze. Like with me when we were—" He fell silent before finishing. The word happy stuck in his throat because he was no longer sure if they were happy at all. She lowered her head, pressing her hands to her chest, as if protecting herself. "I love you," she whispered. "I really do. It was a mistake, Alex. Please forgive me." He looked at her, feeling her words hanging in the air, empty and useless. Love. She'd said it before, on their wedding day, on their first anniversary, in those moments when he thought they were invincible. And now this word sounded like a mockery. "Sorry," he snorted, and the sarcasm burst out. "Are you serious? Do you think I'll just say, 'Okay, Suze, it happens,' and we'll continue to be together, after you slept with Tom in our bedroom? I don't want it to end." She stepped towards him, holding out her hand, but he stepped back, and her fingers hung in the air. "We can fix everything. Please give me a chance." Alex looked at her, and images flashed through his head, their wedding on Lake Michigan, their first home, her laughter at breakfast. 5 years, and then her and Tom, wine, their bed. He clenched his fists, feeling his nails dig into his palms. "To correct?" he said, and his voice became cold as ice. "What do you want to fix, Suze? What did I see? That you chose him while I was planning to surprise you. This is not fixable. This is the end." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook. Alex turned away, looking at the wall where there was a photo of them, the two of them on the beach, 2 years ago. He took it off the hook and threw it into the desk drawer without looking at it. Enough with the illusions. "I'm glad it happened now," he said, turning back. "Better 5 years than 15. It would be better without children, whom I would consider mine, and then find out that they are from Tom. So thank you, Suze. You saved me a lot of time." Her tears stopped, and she looked at him with something like shock. "You can't talk like that," she whispered. "This is unfair." "Unfair?" He laughed, but the laugh came out bitter. "Unfair is what you did, and I'm just stating the facts. You got bored too early in your marriage. 5 years is a long time, but apparently not for you." She was silent, looking at him, and something new flashed in her eyes, not guilt, but awareness. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and swallowed. "Do you really want me to leave?" she asked quietly. "Do you really think that I will forgive and we will continue together?" He looked at her, and there was not a drop of doubt in his gaze. "Pack your things, baby. It's time for you to go home." The word baby came out with such sarcasm that she winced. She stood there for a second, as if hoping he would change his mind, but then she nodded, slowly, as if accepting the inevitable. She turned and walked upstairs to the bedroom where it all began. Alex remained in the living room, listening to her footsteps fade down the stairs. He walked over to the sofa, sat down and closed his eyes, feeling the silence fill the house. Half an hour later, she came down with a suitcase, a small, black one that they took on vacation 2 years ago. Her face was wet with tears, but she didn't cry anymore. She just looked at him with the same mixture of guilt and despair. "I'm going to my parents," she said, putting her suitcase by the door. "If you want to talk." "I don't want to," he interrupted, without getting up from the sofa. "I'll file for divorce tomorrow. The house is mine. We have separate accounts. Everything will be simple." She nodded, biting her lip. "Forgive me," she whispered finally, opening the door. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said, and the door closed behind her with a quiet click. Alex heard her Honda's engine start, and she pulled out of the driveway and drove off into the night. He sat for another minute, looking at the empty sofa where she had just been. Then he stood up, went to the cabinet, took out a bottle of whiskey, the one they kept for special occasions, and poured himself a glass. He drank it in one gulp, feeling the fire burn his throat, and put the glass on the table. The conversation was over. There are no more illusions left. She left, and he was free, not happy, not easy, but free. He took the phone and wrote to Dev. She left. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." The answer came a minute later. "Well done, old man. Hang in there. Beer?" Alex smiled weakly, but sincerely, and answered, "Tomorrow." The morning of April 10th in Arlington Heights began with silence, which Alex Miller had already managed to accept as part of his new reality. A week has passed since the evening Susan left with her suitcase, leaving behind a closed door and an empty house. The sun was shining through the kitchen curtains, streaking the wooden table where he sat with a mug of coffee. The smell of a freshly brewed drink filled the room, but the familiar sound of her steps, her voice, her presence was no longer there. He didn't miss her, not as much as he expected, but the emptiness still felt like an echo in too much space. Alex took a sip of his coffee, looking at the empty chair opposite him. Her boss lady mug sat in the closet, untouched from last week. He didn't throw it away, but he didn't intend to take it out, let it gather dust as a memory of what happened. The house seemed bigger without her. The living room where they watched movies, the bedroom where he now slept on the right side of the bed so as not to feel her absence, the kitchen where her laughter no longer sounded. He was getting used to it slowly but surely. The past week has been a strange mixture of routine and change. On Monday, he filed for divorce, as promised. The lawyer, a dry man of about 50 named Richard, assured that everything would go smoothly. The house was registered in Alex's name before the wedding. He and Susan always had separate accounts, and there were no children. "Divorce without complications," Richard said, flipping through the papers. "6 months, and you are free." Alex nodded, signed everything that was needed, and left the office with the feeling that he had closed a door, but had not yet opened a new one. At work, he carried on as usual: drawings, meetings, coffee with Bob and Dev. Nobody asked where Susan was, although Dev, of course, knew everything. The others just didn't seem to notice that he wasn't wearing the ring anymore or didn't want to bother. He was grateful for this. At home, he removed her things that she did not take: a couple of dresses, cosmetics, books. "I put it in a box and put it in the garage, let her decide what to do with it." He didn't call her, and she didn't call him. The silence between them was final. Alex finished his coffee and stood up to pour more. The coffee maker gurgled, and he looked at it, thinking about how strangely quickly life changes rhythm. 2 weeks ago, he had planned to surprise her with Lakewood, and now he was sitting alone in the house that had become his only. He didn't feel like a winner, but he didn't feel defeated either, just a man who survived and moved on. The phone on the table vibrated, and he picked it up, seeing Dev's name on the screen. Alex smiled weakly, but sincerely, and answered. "Morning, idiot," he said, putting the mug on the table. "Morning, old man." Dev's voice was cheerful, as always. How is the newly made bachelor doing? Okay, Alex sat back, looking out the window. Behind the glass, the neighbor, old Jim, was working on his lawn, as if spring depended on his efforts. I'm drinking coffee. I'm thinking about what to do. What to do? Dev chuckled. You are now a free man. Go to a bar, pick someone up. Or call Katie, she gave you the business card. You're incorrigible, Alex shook his head, but the corners of his lips twitched. I'm not going to shoot anyone. And Katie, I don't know. It's too early. Is it early? Dev snorted. You filed for divorce. Susan left. How long does it take you to stop whining? I'm not whining. Alex took a sip of coffee. I just don't want to rush. Divorce in progress, house empty. I need to get used to it. Okay, get used to it. Dev fell silent for a second, and a shadow of seriousness appeared in his voice. But you're alive, right? Aren't you sitting there depressed? Alive, Alex nodded, although Dev didn't see it. Thanks to you. Lakewood was a good idea. I told you, I'm your lifeline. Dev returned to his usual tone. How are things going with the divorce? Have you signed everything? Yes, Alex leaned back in his chair. I submitted it on Monday. The lawyer said it was simple. The house is mine, the money is separate. I'll be officially divorced in 6 months. Great, Dev whistled. Clean break. What about her? Did you call and cry? No, Alex shrugged. She went to her parents and is silent. I don't call either. Everything has been said. Well done, Dev coughed. Listen, how about a beer in the evening? Let's celebrate your freedom. I'll treat you. Are you giving me a treat? Alex raised an eyebrow. What is this? A miracle. It's a miracle that you haven't fallen asleep alone in this house yet, Dev laughed. Come on, old man. At Joe and Sons at 7. Come. Okay, Alex smiled. But if you start singing, I'll leave. I only promise to drink, Dev chuckled. See you in the evening. See you this evening. Alex hung up and put the phone on the table. He finished his coffee, looking at the empty mug. The conversation with Dev, as always, added lightness. This idiot knew how to pull him out of any hole without even trying. Alex stood up, put his mug in the sink, and walked into the living room. The house was quiet, but not dead. He removed her photo from the wall, but left a picture of them together on the shelf, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder that it happened. He didn't want to erase 5 years, he just wanted to move on. Alex went to the closet where the box with her things lay and thought, maybe I should call her and tell her to pick her up. But then I decided that no, let her decide when she's ready. He closed the closet and returned to the window. Something rustled in the pocket of his jacket hanging on the chair, and he took out Katie's business card, Catherine Lawson, manager. Her number was written in a clear font, and he remembered her smile by the fire, her warm gaze, her, if you decide to come back. Alex turned the business card over in his hands, feeling a slight pang of interest. Dev was right, he liked her, although he didn't want to admit it. But call now? No, it's too early. He put the card back in his pocket, deciding he'd think about it later. The day passed calmly. He went to the store and bought food for the week, now only for himself, without her favorite yogurts and wine. Cleaned up the lawn just to keep my hands busy. I watched the news, but turned off the TV after half an hour. There was too much noise. By 6 he had showered, changed into jeans and a dark shirt, and drove to Joe and Sons, where Dev was waiting. Dev was already sitting by the window with 2 bottles of beer when Alex entered. He waved at him, and Alex sat down opposite him, feeling the familiar smell of bacon and coffee bring him back to something simple. You look human, Dev said, handing him a beer. Congratulations on your first week of freedom. Thank you. Alex took the bottle and took a sip. I feel almost normal. Almost, that's already a victory. Dev clinked glasses with him. Now let's drink to this. For you, old man, and for not breaking. For us, Alex corrected, and they drank. The beer was cold, bitter, and it washed away the remaining heaviness. They chatted about work, about Bob spilling coffee on his drawings again, about plans for the summer. Dev, as usual, joked, and Alex laughed, not loudly, but sincerely. Listen, Dev said when they finished the second bottle. What if seriously about Katie? Call her. Not now, but soon. She suits you. Maybe, Alex shrugged, looking at the empty bottle. Let's see. For now, I just want to live alone. Live, Dev nodded. But don't stay too long. You're too good to give up. I won't, Alex smiled. I promise. They sat for another hour, and Alex went home around 9. 10 years later, the morning of April 1st at the Harris and Sons office in suburban Chicago was as normal as it could be for a construction firm in the middle of spring. Alex Miller, now 45, sat at his desk checking blueprints for a new apartment complex. His hair had turned slightly gray at the temples, but his eyes were still as honest, as Susan had said so long ago, only now they were more calm and less naive. The office has hardly changed in 10 years. The same computers, the same drawings on the walls, the same smell of coffee from the machine in the hallway. Only Bob had retired, and his place was taken by a young engineer named Lisa, who was now arguing with someone on the phone in the corner. The door to the office opened, and David Crawford walked in, still the same Dev, only with a slightly more noticeable beer belly and the same grin. He was 46 and still a bachelor, although he now joked that he was too old for these games. He held 2 bottles of beer in his hands cold, with drops of water on the glass, and Alex raised an eyebrow at him. Seriously, he said, pushing the drawings aside. 10 in the morning, and you already have beer? It's not just beer, old man. Dev plopped down on the chair opposite, putting the bottles on the table. This is a tradition. 1st of April. 10 years since the day your life went downhill and I saved it. Alex laughed, shaking his head. He took the bottle, opened it on the edge of the table, an old trick he'd learned from Dev, and took a sip. The beer was light and bitter, and it took him back 10 years ago, to the evening when he found Susan with Tom. Then it was the end of the world, but now it's just a story that he and Dev recalled with sarcasm and laughter. Saved, you say? Alex leaned back in his chair, looking at his friend. You just got drunk with me at Lakewood and sang out of tune around the fire. Is this called salvation now? It's called genius, Dev grinned, opening his beer. If it weren't for me, you would still be sitting at home whining over her photo. And so look at yourself. Married, happy, gray-haired, but still handsome. Alex chuckled, looking at the wedding ring on his left hand, simple, silver, not like the one he wore with Susan. 10 years ago, he could never have imagined that he would be sitting here, married for the second time, to a woman who had become more to him than he could have ever hoped for. Catherine Lawson Katie had come into his life that weekend at Lakewood, and she had now been his wife for 8 years. The gray hair is your doing, he said, taking another sip. You're making me old with your antics. I'm making you look younger, Dev winked. Okay, let's go for it. In 10 years. For Lakewood, and for not breaking. They clinked glasses, and glass clinked against glass. Alex drank, feeling the beer wash away the remnants of his morning's work. The 1st of April was no longer a day of pain for him. Now it was an anniversary, which he celebrated with Dev, and with Katie a little differently. How is Katie? Dev asked, putting the bottle on the table. Still tolerates you. He tolerates it, Alex smiled, and there was warmth in his voice. We're going to Lakewood tonight. We celebrate the anniversary of our acquaintance. Wow, romance, Dev whistled. Still the same suite with a view of the lake? No, just a cottage, Alex shrugged. No luxury, no surprises. One time with jokes was enough for me. Dev laughed, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, that surprise was epic. You wanted to surprise her, but you surprised yourself. Classic. Classic, Alex agreed, and his smile became a little crooked. But everything is for the better. If it weren't for that day, I wouldn't have gone to Lakewood with you. And I wouldn't have met Katie. It's fate, old man, Dev nodded with feigned seriousness. I was your Cupid, only with beer instead of arrows. You were a jerk with a beer, Alex shook his head, but laughed. But yes, thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. They fell silent, looking at the bottles. 10 years ago, Alex returned home, found Susan with Tom, went with Dev to Lakewood, and started a new life. The divorce went quickly, as the lawyer promised. After 6 months he was free. Susan went to live with her parents, then, according to rumors, moved to another state with Tom, but their paths never crossed again. He sold her belongings at a garage sale, leaving only memories that fade over time. Katie came into his life 3 months after that weekend. He called her, holding the business card she gave, and invited her for coffee just like that, without expectations. She agreed, and their first date was at a small coffee shop in Chicago, where she talked about her dog Max, and he talked about his job. It was easy, natural, and a year later he proposed to her not at the lake, as with Susan, but at home at dinner, which they cooked together. She said yes, and they have been together ever since. How is she doing at work? Dev asked, bringing him back to the present. She's not just a manager now, is she? Yes, Alex nodded. I bought a stake in Lakewood a couple of years ago. Now co-owner. Still running back and forth, but less. Okay, say hi to her. And don't forget the champagne. This is your tradition. I won't forget, Alex smiled. But no business trips or practical jokes. We just go and relax. Wise, Dev finished his beer and stood up. Okay, I'll go to work. Otherwise Lisa will whine again that I'm not doing anything. She's right, Alex nodded at the drawings. Go save the world. Dev left, leaving the empty bottle on the table, and Alex returned to work. The day passed as usual: drawings, calls, coffee. By 6 he got ready, grabbed his jacket, and drove home to the new house he and Katie bought 5 years ago, closer to Lake Michigan. This was not the house where he lived with Susan, but their own, with a large kitchen where Katie cooked and a yard where Max chased squirrels. Katie was already at home when he entered. She stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan, and her dark hair, now slightly gray, was tied into a ponytail. Max, an old Labrador with a gray muzzle, lay at her feet, lazily wagging his tail. She turned around, noticing him, and smiled. Hello, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. How is the day? It's fine. He threw his jacket on the chair and walked up to her, kissing her temple. Dev brought beer and celebrated the anniversary. As always, Katie laughed, returning to the pan. He doesn't change. Never, Alex nodded, looking at her. Is everything ready for the trip? Yes, she turned to him. The suitcase is in the car. We'll leave Max with the neighbors. Lakewood is waiting. Great, he smiled. But no jokes. Once is enough. I promise, she winked, and her smile was as warm as 10 years ago at the fire. Just you, me, and the lake. And champagne, he added. And champagne, she confirmed. They ate, got ready, and left for Lakewood around 7. The road was familiar: a highway, a forest, a turn with a sign. The cottage greeted them with the warmth of the fireplace and the view of the lake, and Alex felt the tension melt away. Katie opened the champagne, and they sat by the window, looking out at the water. 10 years, he said, raising his glass, from the day I arrived here. And he met me. She clinked glasses with him. The best thing that came out of it. The best, he agreed, and they drank. The evening was quiet and clear, as if nature had decided to play along with Alex Miller and Catherine Lawson on their little anniversary. They were sitting in cottage number 7, the same one where Alex had spent his first evening here 10 years ago with Dev. Now everything was different. Instead of whiskey and pain, champagne and peace. Instead of loneliness, Katie, sitting next to her on the sofa with a glass in her hand. The fire in the fireplace crackled, casting warm reflections on the wooden walls, and outside the window the lake sparkled under the light of the moon, reflecting the stars. This was their evening, their tradition, and Alex felt warmth spreading inside, not from the fire, but from what he had built over the years. Katie leaned back on the couch, looking at him with a slight smile. Her dark hair, now streaked with gray, was down, and she looked calm, confident, like a woman who knew what she wanted and got it. She took a sip of champagne, put the glass on the table, and turned to him. 10 years, she said, and her voice was soft, but with a hint of surprise. Did you really come here that day to forget her? Not really, Alex shrugged, looking at the fire. I came so as not to go crazy. To forget that happened later. She laughed, quietly but sincerely, and the sound was like music to him. He placed his glass next to hers and took her hand, intertwining her fingers. Her skin was warm, slightly rough from working in the garden she had planted near their house. 10 years ago, he couldn't imagine sitting here with her, but now he couldn't imagine his life without her. "You looked like a lost puppy back then," Katie said, looking at him with a slight mockery. At the bar, with Dev, I immediately realized that something was wrong. "Lost puppy?" Alex raised an eyebrow, but smiled. "Thank you. And you looked like a savior, with wine and that smile of yours." "It was work," she winked, "but I liked you. Even with this look, everything is gone." "Everything is really gone," he nodded, remembering that evening. Susan, marriage, my plans. But then everything fell into place. Katie squeezed his hand, and her gaze became more serious. "I'm glad you called," she said. "In 3 months, I already thought you threw away my business card." "I almost threw it away," he admitted, looking at her. "Dev made me do it. He said I'm an idiot if I don't call." He was right. "He's often right," Katie smiled. "He just hides it behind his jokes." Alex nodded, thinking about Dev. That idiot with the beer in his hands remained his best friend after all these years. He'd been to his and Katie's wedding, a small ceremony in the Lakewood Gardens 8 years ago, where he'd sing off key and gotten so drunk he'd fallen asleep on a bench. He came to their house, played with Max while he was alive, and still brought beer to the office every April 1st. Dev hadn't changed, and Alex was grateful for that, for his noise, his support, his belief that everything would be fine. They finished their champagne and Katie got up to add more wood to the fireplace. Alex watched her move confidently, but with that ease that he had loved even then. She returned to the sofa, sat closer, and rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said, looking at the fire, "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you had not come here then. If I hadn't come up with that joke." "Nothing good," Alex shook his head. "I would live with her if I didn't know she was with Tom. Or I would have found out later when things were worse, children, debts, all that. That day was a nightmare, but he saved me." "Saved?" She raised her head, looking at him with curiosity. "Yes," he nodded. "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have left with Dev. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't understand that I could be truly happy." Katie smiled, and her eyes sparkled not from tears, but from something warm that he saw in them every day. "Are you happy?" she asked, and there was no doubt in her voice, only the desire to hear it out loud. "Yes," he said, looking at her. "With you, yes." She leaned down and kissed him slowly, softly, as if confirming his words. He hugged her, feeling the warmth of her body, and thought that this was the best thing he had. Not Lakewood, not champagne, not even his friendship with Dev, although he wouldn't have survived without her, but this, Katie, their life, their home. They sat by the fireplace for another hour, chatting about little things, about how she wanted to plant new flowers in the garden, about how he planned to finish the complex project by summer. It was their ordinary life, without drama or surprises, and Alex appreciated it for that. One time with jokes that day 10 years ago was enough. Now he just wanted to live next to her. As the fire began to die, Katie stood up and pulled his hand. "Let's go to bed," she said. "Tomorrow I want to take a walk by the lake. Like then, with you and Dev." "Only without fishing," Alex smiled, standing up. We agreed, she laughed, and they went into the bedroom. The night passed calmly, to the sounds of the lake outside the window and Katie's quiet breathing next to her. In the morning, they woke up late and had breakfast in the main building, now renovated, with new furniture and a menu that Katie herself helped to compile as a co-owner. They walked along the lake, holding hands, and Alex remembered how 10 years ago he sat here in a boat with Dev, trying to catch fish and not drown in his thoughts. Now he was walking with Katie, and the past seemed distant, like a dream. They returned to Chicago in the evening, picked up the car, and drove home. Max was no longer there. He died, and his place was taken by a young dog, a Labrador named Rex, whom Katie adopted from the shelter. Rex greeted them at the door, tail wagging, and Alex scratched him behind the ear, feeling the house come alive with their arrival. Katie left to prepare dinner, and he sat on the sofa with his phone, checking his messages. One was from Dev. "How's Lakewood? Did you forget the champagne?" Alex smiled and wrote, "Everything is great. There was champagne. How are you?" The answer came a minute later. "I'm alive. I'm drinking beer for you." "Hello, Katie." Alex showed the message to Katie, and she laughed. "Tell him he's invited to dinner on Saturday," she said, stirring something on the stove. "Heard?" Alex wrote to Dev. "Dinner on Saturday. Come sober." "I don't promise," Dev replied, and Alex shook his head, putting the phone away. Dinner went as usual. They ate, chatted, laughed at Rex trying to steal a piece of chicken from the table. Then they went to bed, and Alex looked at the ceiling, feeling Katie breathing next to him. This was his life, now simple, warm, real. Susan remained in the past, like a shadow that was no longer frightened. The divorce, the pain, that day in the bedroom, it all brought him here, to Katie, to Dev, to himself. He closed his eyes, thinking about how he lost everything 10 years ago, but found more. Lakewood became not just a place, but a point where his life turned around. And he was grateful not for the pain, but for the fact that it had brought him to this. One time with jokes was enough. Now he lived without them, and this was the best he could wish for himself. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.